The Darksiders IP is one of the rare series I'll replay every few years, and despite agreeing with the arguments they're all derivative amalgamations, I still like them more than many of their inspirations. The most obvious source of inspiration for Darksiders 2010 is the 3D Legend of Zelda games, but at the time my experience was limited. I tried The Legend of Zelda and The Adventure of Link on the NES, but my younger self preferred simpler games like those I had first experienced in the arcades. Think short play sessions, local co-op, a focus on improving skills through repetition, and chasing high scores. It was only in my teenage years, having drifted from Nintendo and fully invested in the PlayStation ecosystem, that I came to appreciate the influence those games had. Blood Omen Legacy of Kain provided me with an ambitious yet inconsistent 2D Zelda-like, but it was the 3D sequel, Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver, that got me hooked on that distinctive gear and skill-gated world structure, elaborate dungeons, and the idea that boss battles could be actual puzzles. As a result, the pre-launch marketing for Darksiders made it one of my rare Day 1 purchases, and I was not disappointed. 13 years later, as an owner of a Nintendo Switch finally working through the Legend of Zelda series, I thought I'd get my thoughts in order and explain why I still recommend it over many of the games it draws inspiration from. As much as I'd love to say I bucked trends and was mature for my age, the combination of legitimate and self-defeating rebellion was common during my teenage years. A perfect fit for Darksiders' fight the power narrative, and a cast with only two emotions, anger and angst. Where The Legend of Zelda's younger target audience could somewhat limit its narrative complexity, Darksiders went with an edgy, mature rating, hardly novel for the era, but it did something that few games were brave enough to try. Religious references were certainly common enough in video game narratives and character design, but Virgil literalized chunks of the Christian Book of Revelations, personified angelic and demonic figures, and reframed the four horsemen of the apocalypse as arbiters of the balance. As enforcers for the neutral Charred Council, their task was to maintain a pact between heaven and hell, forged with 7 seals of course, to prevent an end war before the kingdom of man had risen in strength. Events kick off in style as war, dutiful, stoic and gravelly voiced, arrives on Earth by way of a flaming meteor. He sets about laying waste to demon and angel kind alike, but swiftly realizes the other horsemen are absent. Humanity has been wiped out as collateral in a battle that clearly started long before his arrival, and the leader of the angelic hell god, Abaddon, seems confused that war is present at all. Abaddon falls to a powerful demon and, lacking the powers the breaking of the 7th seal should have imbued him with, war is swiftly defeated. He materializes a century later at the feet of the Charred Council, only to discover he's accused of riding unbidden, triggering the end war, siding with demons, and dooming humanity. It's a scripted, tutorial-heavy prologue, but one that serves to establish war's distrust for every faction. Still, in an attempt to preserve the balance, he requests permission to return to the Earth and try hunt down the Destroyer, a new demonic overlord that has laid claim to the ruined Earth, guarded by a quintet of powerful chosen. To keep him in line, he's shackled to a wraith-like watcher, voiced by Mark Hamill doing another Joker variant, and sent hurtling back to a post-apocalyptic Earth. Now, while Darksiders has a slower opening half, it commits to the wild premise and larger-than-life cast, ramps up the intensity, and maintains a decent pace into the finale. Even a potentially annoying late-game fetch quest serves as an excuse for a string of important encounters and cutscenes, and perhaps a little secret hunting on the side. War begins his adventure conversing with Vulgrim, a demonic merchant that trades souls for information. He then makes a deal with Samael, an unhinged and scheming demon willing to unshackle his suppressed power and guide him to the Destroyer's Black Throne in exchange for the power-infused hearts of the Chosen. He befriends Ulthane the Black Hammer, a maker and self-imposed exile on Earth, for actions he's initially unwilling to disclose. He repeatedly battles Uriel, surviving leader of the Hell God remnants, intent on seeing war pay for his supposed crimes. Even his interactions with the sentient Chosen are entertaining, at least for the brief period of time before he rips the beating hearts out. It helps no end that Darksiders features stylish, well-directed cutscenes that benefit from the chunky visual style and character designs. Dialogue is delivered with almost theatrical prose, and an orchestral soundtrack makes every interaction feel more epic than it probably deserves. Another plus is how War is so easy to like as a protagonist. At first he's just an admirable foil to the deceitful and scheming secondary cast, but you'll eventually realize he knows more than he's letting on, and actively works towards setting up a finale that ensures each faction pays for their betrayal of the balance. It's not the most surprising tale, but it is satisfying and cathartic to watch events unfold. That said, a novel premise, memorable characters, distinctive aesthetics, and stylish cutscenes can only carry a video game so far. Thankfully, Darksiders is mechanically fun, even if its hybrid gameplay loop feels skewed towards combat. The combo-heavy hack-and-slash mechanics feel similar to the PS3-era God of War games, with an effective dash and parry essential to defeating harder-hitting enemy types. It's quick and stylish without needing too many inputs, and supplemented by power and gear upgrades, weapon enhancements, and a finisher system that, in addition to looking great without God of War's tiresome button mashing, provides vital invincibility frames during mass brawls. In theory, there's plenty of depth and several interconnected systems to consider. You acquire 3 weapons that improve with use, the Chaos Sword as an effective all-rounder, the Scythe perfect for crowd control, and a Tremor Gauntlet that excels at stunning single foes. You can purchase new and upgraded combos for each weapon with the Soul's currency, not the dropped on death kind, and they can be modified by equipping enhancements that both add weapon-specific bonuses and passive buffs. War also has his Wrath powers that can offer both defensive and offensive spells at the cost of said resource. New gear also provides useful combat abilities like knockback, stunning, or air juggling, while the Chaos meter builds up to unleash War's ultimate form, giving you a few seconds of invincibility and massive damage output, useful for speeding through a boss phase or dispatching tougher foes in a mob. It's not without issues though. There are a limited number of chests and artifacts to find, meaning you can't upgrade everything in a single run without tedious grinding. As such, you're incentivized to find a few combos you like and upgrade them. When you couple that with spongy late-game enemies, non-boss combat eventually feels like a chore by the end, and this is one of the reasons I prefer the sequels. With all that combat, Darksiders offers little downtime, even when you're puzzling your way through a sprawling dungeon or exploring every corner of the overworld for secreted away legendary weapon enhancements, or health and wrath shards to boost their respective pools. It's a shame as the familiar structures turned into post-apocalyptic dungeons, think a ruined Gothic-style cathedral with the bat problem, a labyrinthine subway station infested with insects, and a web-strewn skyscraper canopy with giant spiders, are all smartly designed and visually striking. Many of the overworld areas feel a little barren by modern standards, even in the remaster, but with oversized architecture that even makes War feel small, the world feels grandiose and intimidating as any high fantasy classic. And of course, it's not just real-world locations fallen to ruin and overrun by green nature or reddish hellscapes. You'll traverse the desert-like, worm-infested ashlands by horse, explore an ethereal remnant of Eden adrift in the void, and ascend the utterly illogical Black-Throne Tower that dominates the horizon. Even if each dungeon sticks rigidly to the Rule of Three approach lifted from the Legend of Zelda games, they're lengthy and complex endeavors that highlight decent variety when it comes to traversal challenges, puzzle types, and a few scripted sequences, along with those chosen boss fights. You'll collect artifacts from lava-filled ruins below a cathedral, shift subway cars around and swim through a flooded station, slow time to dash across worm-infested dunes or avoid demon machinery, and align beams of light through the tower to open a way forward. To aid you in these tasks, you'll acquire spectral wings to glide short distances, a glaive that can imbue itself with fire, a grappling hook to swing across chasms, and even a portal gun to transport war and other objects. Naturally, these gear items aren't limited to the dungeon they're found in. Every new piece of equipment opens up more secrets in the overworld or back in prior dungeons, and they're essential to defeating the dungeons chosen and possibly several sub-bosses. A flaming glaive can bring down Tiamat, the Tremor Gauntlet can shatter the Grievous Shell, and the portal gun allows you to avoid screen-filling attacks and reach the weak points on a massive Straga. It's not all perfect, of course. Darksiders is fond of locking you in rooms until you defeat all enemies, and you'll break back-to-back curses, by way of 8 tutorial-style challenge rooms, within the opening 2 hours, something that was dull the first time and progressively worse with each playthrough. There are some brisk and entertaining scripted events, think stealing an angelic mount or demonic weapon and then mowing down hordes of foes for a few minutes, but the pure combat sequences always pale in comparison to engaging puzzle-like sequences that involve traversal, secret hunting, or boss fights. Of course, part of that might just be the distinctive audio tingle Darksiders gives you when you enter a puzzle room, followed by a satisfying drum roll when you solve it. So over 13 years since its first outing, and with each sequel garnering less success, Darksiders feels like an IP that's slowly fading into obscurity, which is why I hope that if any of this sounds appealing, especially if you're a fan of The Legend of Zelda, Devil May Cry, or God of War, you'll at least give Darksiders 2010 a go. The first game is not my favourite in the series, but it is, objectively, the most cohesive and polished experience, which highlights what the IP has to offer without the issues that come from a failing publisher mid-development or tight budget limitations. You can play it on any platform, including a great Switch port, and as the subsequent games are all prequels or run concurrently, it also works perfectly as a standalone entry. Darksiders might not offer gameplay as complex or polished as many of its inspirations, but you get an unashamedly over-the-top story, memorable characters, a distinctive visual style, and a varied gameplay loop that does a little bit of everything well enough. It's rare that a jack-of-all-trades game rises above a 7 out of 10 score, but I feel Darksiders excels at scratching several itches at once.
Can you restore the balance?
If you've got this far, please consider giving the video a like and maybe subscribing to our channel, as it helps us grow.